Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. So based on my previous post, I got a lot of comments and messages asking me to make a video tutorial or maybe just a brief illustration on how I made this dress. So because I have made the dress already for myself, it's not possible for me to start all over making a full version for myself. So in this video, I'll be making a miniature version of this dress. So please watch. So first thing I did was to make a mini version of my basic bodice block. So I have the front and the back bodice block right there. So the front bodice block is a bit longer than that of the back because of the bust dart. So the difference is 0.25 inch. So if you don't know how to draft a basic bodice, I have a video tutorial for you so you can check it out. So the neck depth and neck width I used for the front, for me, is 4x4 because of how wide I want it to be. While for the back, the neck width was 4 inches and the neck depth was way down to my chest line. So the shoulder to my waist measurement for the front is 3 inches, while that of the back is 2.75 inches. So the difference is 0.25 inch. And for this mini version, the circumference of my waist measurement is 1.75, while the circumference of my bust measurement is 2 inches. Now for the back, starting before the zipper allowance, a quarter of my bust circumference is 2 inches on my chest line, while a quarter of my waist circumference is 1.75, just like the front. So I have created the armhole curve for the front, and I did the same for the back, but the front armhole curve is deeper than that of the back. So moving on, what I'm going to do is that I haven't added the dart allowance for the waist darts on both the front and back bodies, and I haven't also marked out the bust dart on the front. So I will start by marking half of my bust band measurement plus half an inch. In this case, it will be half an inch, but we know in reality it's not possible. So I marked that on my waistline, and I'll also mark the same thing on my underbust line for the front now, and also mark the same thing on my chest line. So after that, I will just square up the lines together with my ruler, and on this line right here, I'll be taking my waist dart. So normally I would mark 1 inch on both sides of my waistline and underbust line, but in this case, the dart allowance that I'll be taking will be 0.25 inch rather. So that would be 0.125 inch on both sides of the line, and I would mark the same thing on my underbust, and after that I would square up the lines together. So make sure that these lines are straight, like very straight. So I'm just trying to make mine as straight as possible, and then I would come down by 1 inch below my bust point line. In this case it is 0.125 inches, and from that point I would make a curve to my underbust on both sides and then make a straight line down to my waistline. Now I just extended the midpoint of my armhole curve like this, and from that point I would make a connection down to my bust point line. So this line is not supposed to be straight, so I'm just going back in to make a curve connection like this because this is a bust. You don't want that place to be sharp. Now from this point, I will go downwards by 1 inch if this was to be my bodice. But since it's not, I would make that 0.25 inch. So I have marked that, and from that point, I would also reconnect down to my bust point line in a curved manner. So after that has been done, I would make an extension of that 0.25 inch dart allowance that I just took right there. This is so as to create a new armhole curve so that I am not short of measurement. So I have reconnected the new armhole curve into my bust measurement on my chest line, and then I would replace this my dart of 0.25 inch right here so that I am not short of measurement. Then on my chest line I would measure what I have for the dart that I took. It is 0.125. So I would replace that on my chest line, and then from that point I would connect down to my waistline like this. And after that I would need to add my side seam allowance of 0.25 inches. This is 1/4 of an inch. So I did the same on my waistline and I connected the lines together. So I extended my armhole curve into that line, and this will be my side seam allowance. And what I'm going to do next is this. I'm going to mark my bust dart of 0.25 inch on my bust point line. So I have done this a lot in most of my videos. So if you don't know how to do this, please kindly check my previous videos. So I will make an extension right there so that while closing the dart, I am not short of measurement. And to close the dart, I would cut through this center dart line like this, all the way to a little bit above my bust point line, 1 inch above my bust point line. And then I would close the bust dart like this. After closing it, I would use my paper tape to keep it in place, and then I would reconnect my side seam allowance like so. After that, I will go ahead and close this dart right along my armhole curve. So I will just pick the first line like this and place it over this new armhole curve like this and smoothen it out. And then I would use my paper tape to keep it in place. So that has been closed. What I'm going to do next is to just trace out my armhole curve, the new armhole curve. So I have tightened the armhole area so that there is no gaping. So next, this is for the cleavage of the yoke. So I want it to be at my bust point, exactly my bust point line. So from my armhole curve, I just made a connection to my bust point line. So if you don't want yours to be so exposed, please make it higher. So this will be my front yoke, and I'll go ahead and cut out the front yoke like this. After that, I would go ahead and cut out my neckline for the front. So this is what the front yoke looks like on a fold. And to cut out the rest of the pattern for the front, I cut through the side seam, and this is what I have. Now I'll go ahead and cut through my darts like so, from the waistline to the underbust. And after that, I will cut through my underbust line like this. So it's just a straight connection, no curve like other corset dresses. It's just straight. And to cut out the rest of the pattern, I will just make a straight line like this so that it is visible, and then I'll go ahead and cut. Remember not to have any sharp edges. Always make sure to blend the sharp edges. So this is what my front patterns currently look like, which is what I actually did for my own dress. So I'll go ahead and just label my pieces. So this will be the F1, and this will be my F2, while this is my F3, and this is F4. Now that's all about it for the bodice draft for the front. So I'll be making use of my F3 and F4 to create the Basque effect for the dress. So I'll place them together like this, and then I would close the point where they match up with my paper tape and draw a straight line there to show the points where they both match up. So I'll just trim off the excess paper tape that I don't need, and I'll move on to the back. Now for the back, what I'm going to do first of all is to just mark my waist dart. So first thing I'm doing right here is to mark half of my bust span measurement plus half an inch, which is half inch in this case. And I just connected the lines to 1 inch below my chest line. And my darts for the back will be the same as that of the front, which will be 0.25 inches right there. So I would divide the line, the mark into two. That will be 0.125 inch on both sides of my dart line, and I will connect from that point down to my waistline. So that is the dart for the back, and I will replace the dart for the back of 0.25 inch right there, and my side seam allowance of 0.25 inch too. And on my chest line, I would add my side seam allowance of 0.25 inch, sorry, I keep saying inches, it's inch. So I will connect the points together, that is my side seams together, like this. And I would extend my armhole curve to my side seam on my chest line and extend my waistline like this. Now I'll go ahead and close the waist dart at the back because I don't want to sew the dart. I don't like sewing that. That's just the truth. So I close the darts with my paper tape like this, and what I'm going to do is to create the back yoke. So from my armhole curve, I'm just making a connection from 2 inches or probably 3 inches below my chest line, and that will form my back yoke. And then I'll go ahead and cut out the back yoke. Please don't forget to add your seam allowance to your shoulder area so that you can join the front and back shoulders together without any issues. So I'm just going ahead to cut out the rest of the back pattern like so, and this is what the back looks like. So this will be BP as in back panel, not bust point, and I'll be adding half an inch seam allowance to this area. So wherever I use an arrow sign, I'll be adding half an inch seam allowance. So the half an inch is to join these sides and these sides together. And for the front, I would be adding half an inch seam allowance on this area of the front yoke. So make sure you always add your seam allowance so that you're not short of measurement. So I would add half an inch seam allowance on the inner side of this part of my F2. Yes, my F2, and on the lower part of the F2, so as to join this F3 and F4 together. So here you can choose to cut it on the fold or add half an inch seam allowance. So make sure you add half an inch to the area where you'll be joining the yoke and that part of the front together, and half an inch seam allowance will be added to the inner part of my F1. After that, I would also add half an inch seam allowance to the upper part of my F3 and F4. So I won't add half an inch yet to the lower part of F3 and F4 because I would need to create the Basque effects for the dress. So these are all the pattern pieces for the front and the back. So it's time to draft out the Sket patterns. So to draft out the Sket patterns, I would measure what I have at the waistline of the lower part of my bodice. So I have 1.75. So I mark that right there, and I would square up the line like this. So the reason why I did this is so that the waistline of the skirt and bodice matches up. So I'm assuming that my waist to hip measurement on this pattern is 1 inch, but it is actually 10 inches in reality. So that is my waistline and this is my hip line. And for my waistline, I would mark 2.25 inches as 4 inches above my knee in this case because it's a mini illustration, and I will scrub the lines together like this. So this is 4 inches above my knee. And from my waistline to my actual knee, it's 3 inches in this case. And from my waistline to where I want the skirt to stop is 6 inches. But the actual length I used when making mine was 52 inches. So I squared up the lines together, and this is my knee line, and this is my skirt length line. After that, I decided to increase my waist to hip line measurement by a 0.25 inch because it appears to be so close. So I have increased that measurement. So this is my new hip line, and I'll discard the older one. So what I'm going to do next is that I have already imputed a quarter of my waist circumference on my waistline. So for my hip line, I would mark 2.25 inches as quarter of my hip circumference measurement, and from my waistline, I would connect downwards with a slight curve to my hip line. And for my 4 inches above my knee line, I have 2.25 inches on my hip line. So I will subtract half an inch from that measurement, and that will be 1.75 inches. So I'll mark that on the 4 inches above my knee line, and also on my knee line, I'll mark the same thing. And after that, I will just connect the lines together. That's from my hip line, I'll connect to 4 inches above my knee line and down to my knee. Now after that, because this is a mermaid skirt, on my skirt length, I would add 5 inches to my hip measurement, whatever I have on my hip line rather. So for example now, if I had 10.5, I would make that 15.5. But in this case, I would just add 1 inch extra to what I have on my hip line measurement. And from 4 inches above my knee line, I would connect down to my skirt length. This is a meme skirt, so you need ease for allowance. So I'm just going back to sort of like blend sharp edges, because all the sharp edges need to be curved. So at the hem of the skirt rather, I would just also make a curve right there because no sharp edges. And then I would place the lower part of the bodice right at the waistline of the skirt. As you can see, they both match up. This is very important, and I would seal that place with my paper tape. So after that, I would just make a straight line at the point where the waistline of the bodice and the skirt meet up, like this. And to create the Basque effect for the skirt, you need to come down at least 5 inches below your waistline. That is the skirt waistline. So I'm assuming that this is 5 inches below my waistline for the skirt. You don't want it to be too deep. So from the side seam at the waistline where the skirt and bodice both meet up, I just made a curved connection to that 5 inches below my waistline. So it is not too deep because I want it curved. So there is side seam allowance already at the side of the skirt all the way to the skirt length. So now I'm just going ahead to cut out the shape for the Basque effect. So to cut out the skirt, I'm also adding 0.25 inch for the hem. That will be for the hem allowance, and I'll go ahead and cut out the entire pattern like this. So for the back part of the skirt, I have already made a straight line right here on my pattern paper. This is because the back part of the skirt is going to be straight, unlike the front. So I would place the waistline of the front on the waistline of the back part of the skirt, and making sure there's an extension right here for the zipper allowance. So I'm just trying to make sure that everything is balanced like so. And once I'm okay with that, I would just go ahead and start cutting out the back part of the skirt like this. So the only difference is that there is a zipper allowance for the back, and that the back waistline for the skirt is straight, unlike the front that is curved. So after cutting out the skirt, I'm just going back to trim off excess that I don't need. And please make sure to place notches at the significant points of your skirt so that when you're sewing, it's easy for you. I'm working with lace. I worked with lace, so I know what I'm talking about. So I just split the zipper allowance of the back into 2, and this is what the back skirt looks like. And I also placed the notch at the center of the front skirt pattern, and I'll be adding 1/2 inch seam allowance to this part of the skirt so as to join it to the waistline of the bodice. So right now, I'm just going ahead to open up the skirt for the front so we can see what it looks like. And right here is the zipper allowance for the back, and that is all for the skirt. And right here I will be adding 1/2 inch seam allowance to attach this part to the skirt. So don't forget to add 1/2 inch seam allowance to the upper part of the bodice, or the centerpiece. I would call this the centerpiece. And also this part of the centerpiece should be cut on a fold, or you can choose to split it open if you want. It's your choice, but for me, I only added 1/2 inch to the lower part and the upper part. So that's all about it for the Basque effect of the dress. So now I'm just going ahead to just arrange my patterns accordingly, placing the back, bodice and yoke together, and also placing all the pieces that I cut out for the front together like this. And also don't forget to add 1/2 inch seam allowance to the upper part of the skirt so as to attach it to the lower part of the bodice, where you should also add 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now for this part of the front, that is the F1, you can choose to cut this point that has the straight line, that is from the bust point line to the under bust line. You can choose to cut it on a fold, or you can choose to split it open and add 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I added 1/2 inch seam allowance there. And for the flounce that you can see on one side of the dress and also around the sleeve area of the dress, I used about 1 yard of satin fabric, doll face satin fabric and crinoline to achieve this. So now to make a mini flounce, all I have to do is to fold my paper like this into 2 and fold it again into 2. Now I am looking for the crease point so as to get the midpoint of this paper. So that is it right there. And after that, I came downwards by 2 inches from the midpoint while making my own flounce. But since this is a mini flounce, I would make this 0.25 inches. So I mark 0.25 inches around the 4 points of the paper like so, and I connected the points together, and this will serve as the basis for the flounce. After that, from this point right here, I would begin to mark the width I want for my flounce. So what I did for mine was to mark 4 inches, but in this case I just marked half an inch, and from this other part of the quadrant I just made a connection to the half-inch mark, and from that point I began to mark half inch around the entire quadrant, and from here I just connected it like this in a spiral form. So you just keep doing this. So if you feel like increasing the length or the width of your flounce, just feel free to do anything you want. So I was satisfied with that half inch. At this point I increased it to 0.75 inch, but in my own case I increased it to 5 inches and subsequently 6 inches. So because this is a mini flounce, I just kept on working with 0.75 inch all the way to the edge of the paper like this. And when I got to this point, I just made a straight connection like so. And the next thing is to just cut out your flounce. I mean, it's as simple as A, B, C, and D. So I'm just going ahead to cut out the flounce following the shape that I created. For the flounce, you're going to need ×2 of this. So one will serve as the lining so as to turn the hem of the flounce. And I also use crinoline. So this gave the flounce that bounced or wavy look that it has. And next thing I'm going to do is to start forming pleats with the flounce. So the more you gather, the more fuller the flounce is going to be and the more wavy it's going to be. And that's all you need to know about the flounce. Now for my sleeve, remember my dress has just one sleeve, so I have cut a mini sleeve. You can see how small it is. So here is the front part of the sleeve, which is much deeper, and this is the back part of the sleeve. So I've placed the sleeve right there, and here I have the front part of my skirt, and this right here is the back area of the dress. And to give the dress little bit of structure, I created boning channels around this area that has the Basque effect for inserting my boning, because what is a corset dress without boning and structure? So that's that about that. Right here, all I'm doing is to just place all the pattern pieces for the front together in such a way to look as if I have sewn them together. So I'm just placing the sleeve right at the shoulder area, and this part of the dress is embellished. Like this area all the way to this side seam area was embellished. So I'm just using my marker to color that part. And over here I have the back yoke. So I just placed the back yoke and shoulder of the front together, and the back panel together, and the skirt together to make it look as if I have sewn all the pieces together. So I'm just taking my time to adjust everything, and then I would place the sleeve head right at the point where the two shoulders will be sewn together like this. So I also created boning channel right here at the back part of the dress. That is the back panel itself, not the yoke. And it all depends on the amount of boning channel you want. And I'll be cutting out 2 layers, or I did cut out 2 layers of my back yoke and just 1 layer of the front. That is, I did not turn the neckline of the yoke at all. So that's that about that. Over here is my mini flounce. So remember, you need 2 of this. So I'm just going ahead to make tiny pleats around the upper part of the flounce. And while pleating, I am securing the pleats with my office pin right here, which is the underbust area. I would place the flounce right at that point like this, which is what I did for my dress, and then I would trace all the way at this point where there's a joining between the main bodice and the yoke, and I'll continue to sew my pleats around that area. So I'll put this part of the front aside, and then position the sleeve right at the shoulder area, and I'll continue to pleat the flounce around that area. So when I get to the head of the sleeve, I'll just increase the amount of pleats right there, and then I'll bend over the flounce and bring it back to the front. So I only want the flounce to be at the front part of the dress. So this is what I have right now. And after that, this part of the dress that has no sleeve, I attached a beaded fringe that I made right there. So the beaded fringe stopped at this point, so the fringe did not get to this part of the armhole, and the fringe is also on the back part of the armhole all the way to the point where the yoke ends. That is to say that the fringe does not get into the side of the back panel. So I made use of this orange sequin lace fabric. So I cut out my front skirt from the lace and also the 3 main pieces for the front part of the bodice, and also the back panel and the back skirt right there. And I use this fabric right here to cut out the back area of my dress, and also to cut out the flounce for the dress too. And I use this skin tone mesh for the yoke of the front and back. And this is what the beaded fringe looks like around the armhole of the sleeveless part of the dress. And I was able to make this after watching some videos here on YouTube. So I can't say I'm a pro, at least not yet. But I might make a video tutorial showing you guys how to make this for yourself. So this is what the embellished part of the dress looks like. You can see how beautiful it is. And this is the back area of my skirt. You can see how nice and laid out it is. And I also have my boning channels right there. As you can see how beautiful the dress is. I'm just in love with the dress. So as for the back, as you can see, I have the zipper. And on this side, you can see the boning channel and the boning I inserted at the back for some structure. And right here at the back is where you can see where the beaded fringe stopped at the back of the dress, and you can see how the fringe sort of like complements the embellishment in front of the dress. And then you can make the layer for your yoke maybe double so that it gives it more structure and stability. As for me, I use just 1 layer. So over here is the flounce attached to this part of the dress. You can see how the hem of the flounce is standing because of the crinoline that I used. And I used my hand needle to sew the flounce to the dress, seriously, because it was that thick. And this is where the flounce ends or starts. And right here is my sleeve. It's just a basic sleeve. If you don't know how to draft a basic sleeve, I have a detailed video for you, so I'll put the link in the description box. So guys, that is all I did in order to make this beautiful dress. And please, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you get alerted whenever I post new videos. Please share my videos if you'd like, and I will see you all in my next video.